next technique that we're going to get into will be a supine bridge, except we are going to add a variation to it that's going to make it a little bit more applicable to having good posture and just in general better gait dynamics. So to really to not have to explain things too much and give you guys more of a practical perspective on things, I'm going to have Kathy go into a supine position so she can go into the supine bridge. Now the first thing that I want you guys to notice is that, so right now she's laying down and she's bridging her hips upward. And it's not to say, bring the hips down a little bit lower, Kathy, then go into a posterior tilt. So it's not to say bring the knees closer together, okay? It's not to say that this is actually a bad technique. It's just contextually speaking, it's going to be problematic as it relates to your posture. As you can see right now, especially as she starts lifting her hips up. Bring your hips up higher, Kathy. As she starts lifting her hips up, she's inducing what we would classify as an anterior pelvic shift. And you guys have heard me talk about that quite a bit throughout this program. The more that we induce an anterior pelvic shift in this fashion, the higher the likelihood is going to end up popping up in your movement and in your posture later on down the line. Another thing I want you to consider is the biggest thing. It's not even the fact that you're doing an anterior shift. My biggest concern is how your knees are positioned here. As you guys can see, she's in a deep knee flexion here as she's finishing out that range of motion. Well, if you're in a standing neutral position, go ahead and rest, Kathy. If you're in a standing neutral position and you're trying to attain good posture, at some point when you're going to get your posterior pelvic shift and do your posterior tilt and get into your neutral stance, your knees are going to have to initiate some form of a lockout. Now, it's not going to be a flimsy lockout where your knees are just kind of coming back, but the key point is that you want your glutes and your quads to work together to finish out that hip extension with the glute max, or I guess we would also classify this as a trunk extension. Now, when you walk, you're not going to be taking a step and then having yourself take a step and then keep your knee forward in this fashion when you finish out hip extension. That wouldn't be conducive towards success when you're walking. When you're going to kick backward, the idea is that you're going to get a slight knee lockout along with the hip extension. And so what we're going to do right now is a technique that's specifically going to help with that problem. So what I'll have Kathy doing, instead of going into the supine bridge, is I'm going to have her bring the back of her calves on top of this bench here. Okay? So now, so you guys understand kind of the general motion of what we're going to do. I'm going to have you lift your hips up off the ground, Kathy. Beautiful. Now from there, I want you to lift your feet up off the bench. More. Lift them out, so at that point you're going to have to lock the knees out a little bit further. So now we're going to get more into this territory of having a fairly neutral spine throughout, all the way down to the knee joint, all the way down to the foot joint. And so now we're going to do a supine bridge with a bit of knee extension associated to it. So now this is going to actually help us build a better posture and build a better hip base without creating any other postural distortions. Again, it's not to say that the supine bridge is a wrong exercise. It's just simply to say that it's limited in its application to help improve your posture at the outset of your training program. So in terms of the specifics of what we want to look for here, let's go ahead and bring the hips down, Kathy. I'm going to have Kathy starting with an anterior pelvic tilt here. So since she's in a slight bit of hip flexion here, you guys will see that. We want to make sure that she's going to retract her abdominal wall and give me an anterior pelvic tilt at the same time.